Hello, OKC First Youth. My name is Pastor Zach, and we are starting a different kind of format for our Sunday schools moving forward, at least until the rest of the church goes back to in-person Sunday schools. I wanted to try it this way just as a way to take some pressure off of Sunday mornings for our pastors who would be teaching this and Sunday school teachers and others as we begin a new season of going to church on Sunday mornings at 10:30. As you know, or at least a lot of you have known that we have recorded on Friday nights and then released on Sunday, but we are getting back to Sunday mornings. We still don't have in-person Sunday school, which is why I'm talking to you here. But I hope that you are able to watch this video and we'll have some companion thinking questions, sort of more just wondering and reflection rather than group discussion, which is what we've generally done. But I'm sitting in my office right now, and I hope that this works. But without further ado, let's just jump in. So let me read to you from Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 28, which is the gospel passage for that's on the lectionary, the revised common lectionary, which is what we work from as a pastoral staff. And I think it's a great way for people to navigate through the Bible on a week-to-week basis, and for all of us to be doing that together as a larger community in the world, because there are thousands of churches that do this. But yeah, let's read from Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 28, and I'm reading out of the NRSV version. So from that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who will lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? And what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." This is the word of the Lord. And so, just a quick little recap of what we just read. Again, this is Matthew 16, verses 21 through 28. Jesus and his disciples are chilling, and Jesus drops kind of a truth bomb on them, right? So they're sitting around talking, and he says that he would end up suffering at the hands of the religious establishment. And he says, like, the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, because of his radical way of doing ministry. And pretty quickly after that, Peter, one of his closest disciples, pretty much goes, "No, not letting that happen. No, that's ridiculous. I forbid it." And Jesus says, crucial words, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Which I thought was pretty strong statement from Jesus. But then Jesus goes on to say, "Deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me," which is also, if you've been around the church long enough, you've probably heard that before, along with the rest of the story. It's a pretty well-known Bible story. But there's so much good stuff in this passage, and I hope you don't mind. I have my notes right here, so that's why I keep looking to this side of the room. But why does the religious establishment want Jesus gone? And I think that's an interesting question to ask, because we look back and we're reading this story. We know the end of the story, which I think is pretty important to this. And we often read ourselves into the story as being the good guys on Jesus' side, because Jesus, he's healing people. He's showing love. He's saying, love your neighbor. And he's upsetting the status quo. which if you're not familiar with that term, upsetting the status quo, essentially a simpler way of saying it is that he's there's the religious establishment is saying this is the way that things have always been done. We have tradition and we have laws, and like you're throwing a wrench in all of that. But I think another important piece to remember with all this is that the church, the Jewish church, had a pretty complicated relationship with Rome. Rome at this point had taken over much of the Middle East, and so Rome was ruled by a guy named Caesar, and Caesar wanted to be the god figure in everyone's lives. Caesar wanted to be the top of everyone's list. Caesar was the greatest form of power, and any threat to that power was not tolerated by Rome. And so think of Caesar thinking of himself as a god. And so any kind of religion apart from Rome was a potential upset to that establishment, was a potential upset to that power for Caesar. And so the church has this really complicated relationship because they're allowed to exist within Rome, but Rome doesn't want any thinking outside the box, doesn't want any upsetting of the status quo. Things were working, and then this guy Jesus comes in and starts preaching love and love your neighbor, and that maybe Caesar is not God. And so it probably didn't take any kind of divine foresight to maybe see this collision course that Jesus was set on between Jesus and then the religious establishment and even Rome. Because anytime that you propose radical change, especially change that upsets power, and people holding that power, things tend to get a little rocky and even violent. But there's one part of this that I definitely want to highlight today, is this word Satan, which is, again, it feels like a strong word to call somebody, especially one of your close friends and close followers. It would be strange if I said it to one of you, obviously, like, hello, Satan. How do you do? But so, like, when you think of the word Satan, like, what do you see? What do you see in your head? I know for me, for a really long time, it was, your classic devil, red horns, maybe like a pitchfork of some kind, a lot of fire, things like that. Somebody who, at least I was taught growing up, somebody who was always out to get me, somebody who was always just trying to trip me up, and that I just had to avoid that, this one like weird demon thing. And I don't necessarily know if that's a healthy definition for Satan, because there's a lot of problematic things with the idea of like a fiery red guy who's out to get you that we're not going to get into today. But I want to give you a little more helpful definition of the word Satan. So not helpful would be red guy with horns looking to trip us up. Helpful would be all that leads us away from the love of God. Everything that leads us from the love of God. So it's not that there isn't a Satan in the world. It's that the Satan is less personified in a person or a thing and more in broader things and more in like big movements and big trends and big, and honestly, probably more, probably a better way to say it would be Satan equals self is greater than God, that I view myself as more important than God, that my needs and wants and desires are more important than God's needs and wants and desires. And it's not that God doesn't care about you or your wants and needs. It's that the hope would be that eventually our needs and wants and hopes would be aligned with God. And that's what we're always working towards. This is why I think it's important to talk about the context of who held power back in Jesus's day. Because world power is driven by self. World power is people who attain power can't help but have more of it. And I mean, that's just human nature. But the Big C church, the global church, and even if you want to narrow it down to the American church, finds itself in a complicated relationship with power. That the church wants and needs influence because the church is, you can maybe even say it's from a pretty pure place, but the church wants to have influence in the world because, we're called to change the world. And so the church has wanted influence for centuries, but sometimes out of necessity, like the church in Rome, has had to find influence through making deals with Caesar, with someone who is antithetical to who they are. Because Caesar is not meant to be the head of the church. Caesar wants to be the head of the church, but Caesar's not meant to be the head of the church. Christ is supposed to be the head of the church. Everything should be done through this lens of what Jesus showed us, which is this self-denying love, which is why verse 24 is pretty crucial to who we are. And I'll reread that. Verse 24, which says, "Then Jesus told his disciples, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Look who has power in the world. Look at entertainers, politicians, people in your spheres of influence. Look at all who have power. And then ask yourself, where does that power come from? Does that power come from self-interest, through making the most money, and that's all wrapped together, through who has the most influence and who can shape the direction of the world? And that direction not having anything to do with self-sacrificial love. So how can we help? This is the question I want you to ask, really. How can we help God reshape the world to look more like a bunch of people who have denied their self-interests and chosen to make the world look more like this radical love of Jesus? How can we do that? How do we help God do that? Because that's what we're clearly called to do. And that's what Jesus has said. That's why Jesus understands this collision course that he's on, but chooses not to stop it because choosing to die for this love is the greatest act of love that we could ever imagine. Not to make God less mad at us. Like, that's not why Jesus died. Like, Jesus didn't die so that, like, God would be like, all right, cool, you guys are good now. We've always been good. God's always loved God's people. Jesus died as a demonstration, as a way for us to see just how far this love needs to be able to go in order to be the self-sacrificial love of God. So how do we help God reshape the world? How do we change the world? How do we partner with God in bringing the kingdom to earth? And one last thing, the love that Jesus showed, this love that we keep calling radical, that same love that upset the religious establishment and got him killed. It's not that radical. Like, Jesus isn't asking us to do, like, move mountains here. It may seem like we need to be able to move a mountain because this type of love we've gotten so far away from it. Like, the powers that be in the world today don't often align with the self-sacrificial love. Does that make sense? It's not that radical to love your neighbor. It shouldn't be a radical concept, but it's become one. It's become this thing like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should be nice to people. Maybe I should maybe look out for people around me. Maybe I should learn to listen to people's struggles. Maybe I should learn to be empathetic and to have compassion. Maybe I should learn to be a little more like that guy that we keep reading about, Jesus. So take a moment, and this is where I end, take a moment to look outside yourself and wonder, how can you help God make a meaningful difference in the world? How can you be a part of this kingdom on earth and turn this concept of self-denying love into something that's not radical, but something that we all can share in every single day? I love you guys. I'll see you this week for our first Wednesday night together back in person. I love you. Peace out.